Karma is a word that is spoken by many people, not only in spiritual traditions or religions like Buddhism and Hinduism, but people throw the word karma around. So I'd like to explain a little bit more about what is the concept of karma, more specifically in Buddhism. First, regarding the word karma itself, the word means literally action. So it doesn't mean punishment or like the common way people understand as a reward or punishment for actions, but actually the word karma just means action. It means something that is done, something that is performed by means of body, by actions of the body, by means of speech, and by means of mental action, which would be thoughts, intentions, will. Now, before we get into the specifics of karma in Buddhism, it's important to understand the place of the Buddha historically. The Buddha was quite revolutionary in some ways because he stood in the middle between what was called eternalism and nihilism. Eternalism means that, for example, there is something like a soul or pure consciousness or somewhere, some destination like a heaven or a hell in which you stay either forever or there's no end, like the idea of no end for evolution, for example. If you have the concept of a soul, you keep going from birth to birth to birth to birth. Or if you have a concept of a heaven or hell, then you go somewhere once you have died. So this idea of eternalism means there's something which extends, like there's something that is the true you, which then goes somewhere to stay, or keeps on going on and on and on through different births. So that's the eternalist perspective. While the opposite view, which is the nihilistic perspective, that will be closer to what nowadays would be the materialism or physicalism, the concept, the idea that we as living beings, we are basically bodies, and the mind it's produced by molecules, by the brain, and once we die, that's it. So there's no continuation after death. It's the end. Once the body dies, there's no more also mind, there's no soul, there's nothing that carries over. So you had those two views. One was the eternalist view, normally more related to the concept of a soul, and then you have the nihilistic view, which is more related to the idea that there's only body, there's only matter, and once this body dies, once there's no more energy produced in the body, then it finishes. The Buddha stands a little bit in the middle because he said there is a continuation. So he was against the nihilistic, materialistic view that there is only one body and the mind, but he also didn't side with the idea of a soul, of something eternal. So there is a process of body and mind which continues from birth to birth, but it's not exactly a soul. It's more a combination of mental stuff and physical stuff which carries over. And also there's a possibility to end that cycle, which would be in Buddhism terms, to end samsara, to finish the rounds of rebirth. On this Asian, or let's say the Hindu, the Indian traditions of spirituality, the concept of karma is very important because it justifies morality. If you don't have the continuation process, then that means in this life you can basically, with death, get around or get by without the consequences of your actions. So even if you are, let's say, what would be considered a very bad person, you are a serial killer or someone that commits a lot of crimes and provokes a lot of suffering, once you have died, that's it. There's no continuation, so there's no quote-unquote payback. So karma, from the perspective of these spiritual traditions, is what truly justifies morality. So you can't escape anything. Whatever action that is done will always tend to have a reaction. The Buddha actually, on the sutras, on the early Buddhist texts, the Buddha used to say that the biggest enemy of his philosophy of Buddhism were the materialists, the ones that were saying once the body fades, that's it, there's no continuation, because they're basically deniers of karma. They're saying that there's no continuation for the actions, therefore there are no basis to judge morality. Like all idea of morality is just a creation of the human mind. It doesn't mean like the world is, or the universe is moral, or it has kind of these payback situations. Once you have died, that's it. There's no more payback, there's nothing that will happen as a continuation of your previous actions. So the Buddha understood that philosophy is the worst for justifying a moral life. So he would prefer even those that were speaking about a soul or the eternalist views. He said at least they were better because in general they were talking about moral terms, about living in a way that promotes better karma, because even though there might be the process of death, there will be some continuation which is based on how the person has conducted his or her life. Now, a few specifics of morality in Buddhism is that first, the main factor for karma is actually intention. The Buddha has placed karma mainly on the mind. That means what really defines if a karma is good or bad is the intention behind that action. So that means even if you do something that is bad with an intention behind it, a will that is good, like you're trying to help, for example, you're trying to be supportive, you're trying to be compassionate, and maybe that action doesn't turn out to actually be good, still the intention was favorable, therefore the karma is not necessarily bad. Or as another example, if you do something by accident, let's say by accident you hurt someone, but you didn't have the intention to do it, also doesn't count as a bad karma. When you say good and bad karma, it's really, in terms of most people, define as good. So things that reduce suffering, physical suffering, mental suffering. So all actions that reduce that load of suffering that we all tend to carry in life, that will be considered good actions, and all actions that are increase the load of suffering be considered bad actions or bad karma. And also we can say that actions that reduce selfishness, actions that are less self-centered, they are also considered good karma. Actions that are more self-centered are considered worst karma. There are fine points on the discussion, but mainly it will be that in general any action that is self-centered will have a tendency to cause more harm, and any action that is less self-centered will tend to cause more good. A few other confusions that the Buddha tried to clarify is first that idea of that everything is determined, everything is predestined, or that everything is random. So he was against those two extremes as well. Certain things are predestined, or let's say predetermined. For example, you're born in a certain place, you're born with certain parents, you're born in a certain culture at a certain time of the earth, so there'll be many influences on you. Then you have influences of nature, the seasons, you have influence of age, how your body changes, and you have influence of other people, animals, places, so everything is kind of interacting with you and then shaping your karma. And then the place where you truly have some sense of freedom of will, of choice, and is on your own mind. So it's in terms of freedom of action, actually on the Buddhist perspective, you have not so much. Many elements that are kind of interplaying with you and defining how you're going to feel and behave. A small one is your mind and the capacity of observing or experiencing a situation, then deciding how to act on top of the situation. Here we get a little bit of the introduction of meditation related to this willpower, because mindfulness is a training of the mind to have more sense of space. If you're more detached from your own thoughts, if you're more detached from your own past experiences, if you're more free to choose, or the sensation of freedom to choose, you might be able to take better actions. While if you don't train the capacity of mindfulness, kind of a certain level of distance between you and your thoughts, a kind of a bird's eye view or a broad view regarding your mind, then you tend to always act constricted by your past experiences, constricted by anxieties about the future, constricted about selfishness, selfish motives. So the mental training of meditation is actually to amplify your capacity of willpower. So although you have so many factors interfering with your freedom, again, nature, other people, culture, the body, disease, still through the capacity of meditation, you can maybe open more scope for, at certain points, to have a sense of stopping and deciding how to act. The theory of karma, according to Buddhism, is also to explain why sometimes people do bad actions and don't suffer visible consequences, or some people do very mild actions and suffer big consequences. So the simile that the Buddha has used was, if you take a pinch of salt and throw in a river which has a lot of water, or a big body of water, it doesn't get salty. The lake or the river doesn't get salty just because you throw salt on it. But if you get salt, even a pinch of salt, and throw in a cup of water, that water now will taste salty. So what he meant is that depending on how much good karma you have from previous existences, any bad action might not have so much of an effect. While if you don't have much good karma, any bad action, any, let's say, salty taste will alter the experience. So this will kind of justify why some people can get around with certain things and other people can't, or certain circumstances that we call luck or we call good genetics. All those things that we kind of normally will speak as if it's luck or like lottery, you won the lottery. In life, those things will be addressed as reasonings from karma. The last point on the concept of karma in Buddhism is that there's always a tendency for beings to move downwards. So the pull of life, of nature, is more actually for the bad, for bad karma, more for selfish. In that sense, that's why Buddhism has always been very emphatic on the idea of valuing a human life and valuing the capacity of humans to be able to train their minds through meditation, through wisdom, through studies, through acting in daily life, relationships, etc. So this overall training of the mind for generating better karma, because the tendency due to ignorance, not knowing better, is always to be more selfish. So beings, all of us, if left on our own devices, according to the Buddhist perspective, will tend to lean towards bad actions. Therefore, the mental training is to bring some opposition to that tendency. And here also we have a distinction between Buddhism and more New Age perspectives that we're all evolving. Some philosophies speak on those terms, that we're all kind of evolving as a species, and the earth is evolving and so on. From the Buddhist point of view, we don't really have that, because karma is kind of more complex. There's so many factors at play. You can't say there's exactly a plan that we are going as a ladder, we are just climbing up. Once more, the perspective is more like a tendency for downward movement instead of upward movement.